Your neighbor knows a lot about your dog that even you don't know. They know what time the barking starts. They know how long it lasts. They know which days your dog barks more than usual. On the other side of the wall, they have heard things you never will because you weren't there. Many dogs look completely normal the moment you walk through the door. Calm, maybe a little excited, acting like nothing happened. And according to them, nothing really did happen. But you saw the evidence. The cushion on the floor, the corner of the rug folded over completely. That strange silence hanging in the air when you walked inside. You assumed they did it because they were bored, maybe because they were being naughty, maybe because they were having a bad day. But animal behavior researchers have been doing something most owners never do for decades. They turn on cameras and leave. And what those cameras have captured, hour by hour and heartbeat by heartbeat, has revealed one of the most surprising discoveries in animal psychology. When your dog is alone, they are not simply missing you. Something much more specific is happening inside their brain. And it begins before you even close the door. By the end of this video, you may never look at the creature you leave behind every morning the same way again. 1. The camera never lies. In 2010, researchers from the University of Milan placed cameras inside the homes of 23 dogs. And what they discovered was shocking. Barking, whining, and howling began an average of 3 minutes and 15 seconds after the owner left. Destructive behavior started within 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That is how long your shoes may have before becoming a target. But the more interesting discovery came afterward. That first chaotic phase, the barking, the scratching at the door, slowly decreased. And when you come home to find the house intact and the noise gone, you naturally assume your dog has calmed down. They didn't. The cameras showed something different. As vocalizations decreased, growling increased. Heart rates remained elevated. The dog had simply moved from one expression of stress to another. The noise stopped. But the physiological stress response continued, and when researchers tracked longer periods, they discovered something even more surprising. The pattern did not show a steady decline. Every 23 to 28 minutes, a new peak appeared. Another burst of movement or vocalization, then a quiet period, then another peak. This was not relaxation, it was a cycle. The silence between those peaks was not peace. Now compare that with dogs who do not have separation problems. Researchers at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences observed this group while they were left alone for up to 4 hours. These dogs spent around 97% of their time in passive behavior, lying down, resting, occasionally checking their water bowl, not stressed, not frustrated, just waiting. The difference between the two groups was not breed, not age, not even genetics. Research points to one major factor above everything else: whether the dog has learned what to expect. But before we get there, we need to talk about what happens before you even leave the house. 2. The stress begins before the door closes. In the 1980s, veterinary behavior specialists Borchelt and Voith documented something that has been repeatedly confirmed ever since. Dogs with separation anxiety often begin showing measurable stress responses while their owners are still home, not when the door closes, before the bag even comes out. Through simple conditioning, dogs begin connecting your entire leaving routine backward. You check your phone, you put on your shoes, you look at the clock. Each of these actions becomes a signal after being repeated hundreds of mornings in a row. And that signal means one thing: I'm about to be alone. By the time you reach the door, some dogs are already whining. Some pace back and forth. Some follow you from room to room, as if they know exactly what is coming and are hoping this time you will stay. For years, the standard advice was to desensitize dogs to departure cues. Pick up your keys randomly during the day, put on your shoes, and sit back down. Make these signals lose their meaning. Researchers at the Autonomous University of Barcelona studied this approach in 2014 and found the evidence was more complicated than expected. Making departures unpredictable does not necessarily reduce fear. For some dogs, it can actually increase it. Because the problem is not the keys. The problem is uncertainty about what happens after you leave. Your dog is not afraid of your shoes. They are afraid that you might not come back. If this is already changing the way you see your dog, subscribe. Every video on this channel is built around what science actually tells us, not what we simply assume. But don't leave before hearing this, because the way you act when you come home may influence how your dog handles your departure. 3. The moment you return may matter more than the moment you leave. The Royal Veterinary College conducted a long-term study called Generation Pup. They followed 145 dogs during their first 6 months after adoption, looking at what predicted separation-related problems. And they discovered something that surprised many trainers. Emotional goodbyes were not the issue. Long hugs, 5-minute farewell rituals at the door. None of these showed a meaningful effect. What mattered was the return. Owners who came home discovered damage and reacted with visible frustration. Raised voices, prolonged reactions, obvious disappointment directed toward the dog were much more likely to have dogs that developed separation-related behaviors. The dog cannot connect your frustration to the chair leg they chewed 4 hours earlier. There is no usable chain of cause and effect in that moment. What your dog connects with your frustration is your arrival. And over time, your arrival becomes something they need to prepare for. And this is why it matters. A dog that feels anxious when you come home often feels even more anxious when you leave. The two ends of absence become connected. You leave and they panic. You return. They panic for a different reason. The entire day becomes filled with anticipatory stress. The same study also found that punishment, scolding, ignoring, or physical correction significantly increased the likelihood of developing separation-related problems. 4. Getting a second dog is not the solution. The most common advice owners receive for a dog with separation anxiety is get another dog. But research provides almost no support for this idea. A 2021 study involving 77 dogs found that male dogs in multi-dog households actually showed more vocalization when left alone compared to dogs living as the only dog. Because separation anxiety is not simply about being alone. It is about being separated from a specific person. A second dog does not fix that. It only leaves 2 dogs in the house with different problems. And your neighbor's week just became much longer. 5. The quiet dog may be the one you should worry about most. This is the part most people miss. And there is a reason dogs make it so easy to miss. You come home, the house is intact, no damage, no mess. Your dog looks at you from the couch with an expression that seems completely normal. You assume everything is fine. In the 1960s, psychologist Martin Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania conducted a series of experiments that became one of the foundations of psychology. Dogs were exposed to unavoidable stress. Later, when escape became possible, many of these dogs did not even try. They simply lay there and accepted what was happening. Seligman called this learned helplessness. In a major revision of this theory in 2016, Seligman acknowledged that the original framework needed to be reversed. Passivity is not something animals simply learn. Passivity can become the brain's default state after prolonged, unavoidable stress. What must be built is the belief that your actions can change the situation. A dog that stops barking after an hour has not necessarily accepted the situation. They may have stopped believing their behavior matters. And there is an even newer layer to this. A 2019 study found that in severely anxious dogs, long-term cortisol measured through hair samples, reflecting months of hormonal activity, was sometimes lower than in calmer dogs. Not because they were less stressed, because their stress system had been activated for so long that it was beginning to shut down. So the dog that looks fine may actually be the one you should worry about most. 6. Your stress affects your dog's stress. Outside of veterinary research, this is rarely discussed, but it should be. In 2019, a team from Linköping University in Sweden measured long-term cortisol levels in 58 dog owner pairs. Not the cortisol spike from one bad moment. The slow hormonal accumulation captured through hair samples over weeks and months. The levels moved together. Stressed owners had stressed dogs. Calmer owners had calmer dogs. When researchers looked at the direction of the relationship, who influenced whom, the answer was clear. The owner's cortisol predicted the dog's cortisol, not the other way around. This means a dog living with a high baseline of stress does not begin separation from zero. They begin already elevated. The 8 hours you spend away are not experienced in isolation. They happen on top of everything that is already built up. 7. Products don't matter. Repetition does. The industry surrounding separation anxiety products is enormous. Pheromone diffusers, calming supplements, anxiety jackets, white noise machines. Most owners have tried at least one, and most owners describe the results as somewhere between modest and non-existent, because many of these products attempt to treat the 8 hours you are away. But the real intervention happens during the other 16 hours. Let's look at the evidence. Dog calming pheromone diffusers sold under brands like Adaptil have not shown meaningful improvements in barking, scratching, whining, or heart rate in the most rigorous placebo-controlled studies. Leaving the television on has shown no measurable effect compared to silence. Puzzle toys may provide minutes of distraction, but in severely anxious dogs, they can sometimes backfire. Once the food is gone, the dog realizes you are still missing, and the real reaction begins. The one approach with consistent evidence: gradual exposure, not leaving for 5 minutes and hoping for the best. Starting with seconds, walking toward the door, coming back, touching the handle, coming back. Building a history of returning so gradually that your dog's nervous system never reaches the point of panic. It feels almost ridiculously slow. Standing outside your own front door for 30 seconds and coming back inside does not feel like training. It feels like nothing. But you are not teaching obedience. You are creating enough repetitions for your dog to learn. You leave, you return. The prediction system in their brain begins to update. Practitioners using this approach consistently report the same turning point. When a dog can comfortably tolerate around 40 minutes alone, progressing toward 4 or 8 hours often becomes much faster. The 40-minute mark is not magical. It is simply the point where the dog has collected enough evidence to update their internal prediction. For more severe cases, a clinical study involving 229 dogs found that combining fluoxetine with behavior modification produced a 73% improvement rate compared to 51% with behavior modification alone. The medication does not simply sedate them. It helps make the brain more capable of forming new beliefs, and that is the entire goal. 8. The door closing and opening are the same event. This is what cameras have shown us for 30 years. Some dogs wait. Some spend your entire absence cycling through stress every 20 minutes. Some become quiet in a way that looks peaceful but is not. And almost none of them understand their experience as something caused by a mistake you made or something that can be fixed with a toy or a pheromone plug. They are responding to the absence of a specific nervous system. Yours. For months, their nervous system has been calibrated around yours until your cortisol levels begin moving in the same direction. The dogs who struggle the most are not necessarily poorly trained. They are simply dogs whose nervous systems, not their intelligence, have not yet learned this. The door closing and the door opening are the same event, just in a different order. If this changed the way you see what happens when you leave your dog behind for work, comment below. Does your dog show signs before you even pick up your keys?